Hello everyone and welcome to BTech Modding. Yeah, I feel like not using a chair today, so we'll do it like this. Today we have a special guest, which is Project A.R.E.S. A.R.E.S. It's my biggest project ever, at least in my opinion. It won CMWS 20 as Best Hour of the Year. So first place case mod, basically. I'm sure a lot of you guys already saw it on this channel from Mod of the Month and the CMWS 20 winners announcement. And we're discussing one specific feature today about this project. If you know the project, you're probably already guessing it. If you don't, let me show you what I'm talking about. So the PC is currently powered on. It's all working. Wouldn't normally expect what I'm about to do. Yep, the camera was there all along and the internal side has changed because the motherboard tray of A.R.E.S. is rotatable by 180 degrees. Actually, let me get my chair because I'm already tired. Okay, so how did I do this? First of all, Alex said in those two videos where A.R.E.S. was presented and shown that this feature is actually motorized, and it's not, simply because I was running out of time. The deadline for the CMWS 20 was there. Secondly, there wasn't much space to idle the motorized gear. It would have taken a lot of work to make everything fit. And lastly, to me, it wasn't really worth it. It's originally meant to be the solution to one of my biggest problems when it comes to showcasing your PC into your setup. I'm the type of person that likes to change the setup often. That often requires me to move the case from one side to the other, and that's not always a good thing, because if you have a standard case, you will have the hardware showing on the left side, and if you put it on the left side of the desk, the hardware is just completely hidden and you can't see it anymore. So that's kind of where it all began for me to come up with this solution. Obviously, it's not my main rig, so I'm not using it. So you would think, yeah, okay, but it's useless. Yeah, it's useless because I don't make use of it, but I'm sure it played a huge role in the score of CMWS 20 and actually got me the first place. So yeah, it has a use. I don't make a use of it, but it works. So that's what matters. It is also a huge help when trying to bleed air from the water cooling loop. You just tilt it and it completely eliminates the air from the water blocks. So let me get it back. You can have it laying flat or at a slight angle. I usually like to keep it at like 10 degrees. It has fixing points on the walls, so you can block it in place. In this video, I want to show you how I actually engineered it. Wow, that sounds fancy. So I think it's time to pop the front open and show you the mechanism. But first, I want you to appreciate the front Starry Night. This also could make for an interesting video on this feature. Oh, actually, before I pop the front open, I have to turn it off, unfortunately, because the power button is on the front panel. So I have to unplug a couple of cables that plug it right into the front panel. So that's done. So this is the front panel. It's really hefty because it has this 15 millimeters acrylic piece, and behind there's also a 2 centimeters of epoxy resin with the fiber optics in there. This is a panel that I made to just hold the LEDs in place. These are what lights up stars at the front, so let's just remove those as well. Here it is. It's basically the same thing on the other side. It's just laid out a bit differently because there's not this, and the cables come out from the top, while these come out from the bottom, so it's a bit different. Also the tubing comes from the top on the other side. So what you're looking at here, actually make me get you a little bit closer. So this is what you don't normally see when looking at A.R.E.S, because it's obviously hidden, and I think that's why it's also the most interesting part, because not a lot of people actually have seen this after they saw A.R.E.S for the first time. So what this design actually does is allowing for the cables and tubing pass-throughs to move freely. So I designed these cutouts on a radius to allow for the 180 degrees movement. So this is the starting point, and I wanted to get it here. So when it rotates, it actually makes use of this ball bearing, which helps the rotation. And I made the tubing long enough to allow the full movement, and clamped the cables to have them as short as possible, but still long enough and free enough to move those 180 degrees. The same was done on the tubing. I blocked it here, so only a small portion is actually moving. That's important because the less is moving, the better. This took a lot of trial and error. I think it took me like 10 days of design to make this work because of my lack of experience in 3D modeling, and it actually involved some simulation as well for this, in order to be sure I was going to get a working final result, not only based on the mechanics, but also based on the clearance that I was going to achieve in the central part, because there are the side rings. There was the risk that it were going to block the motherboard tray at some point, so I had to account for that as well. Obviously we have soft tubing on the sides. I couldn't use hard tubing in a moving part. So let's get to the internal. What we have here is this disc, which is connected to the wall via that center screw, so the movement is allowed and centered. There are a series of holes behind this ring, and 2 free holes on the ring itself, right there and on the opposite side, and those serve as a fixing point when you want to keep it in place. So there's the ring. Then I have 2 clamps on each side, which are directly fixed to the ring, I mean the disc, and hold the motherboard tray in place. Then you can see this pass-through fitting, which is on both sides, and it basically connects one side to the other, and in between there are the GPU and the CPU, which are obviously water cooled. So what's even more interesting in my opinion is how I managed the cables. You can see here I machined a bunch of channels in the 15mm motherboard tray. I included a power supply bracket to mount it directly to the acrylic. So all the cables, all the main cables are inside the motherboard tray, and they run all across to reach all of the components. Most of the components are on this module, so it made my life easier, especially when it comes to the power supply, because I don't have to route a lot of cable outside this section. But I still obviously had to route some of them, because there's the pump, the LEDs, the power cable. So I also did a pass-through for the power cable as well. It's on the bottom of the case. And what I did for this is I designed these little fittings for the corrugated tubing. I don't know if it's really called like that in English, like electrician tubing. I don't know. You get the point. I have a couple fittings, if you wanna call them so. I made here. The corrugated tubes just clamp in these two, and it makes for a really seamless look. So the cables run outside the motherboard tray and into the tube, and the tube goes into the disc, the rotating disc, via a dedicated hole, and it actually clamps itself into the hole because it's tight enough to hold it, while obviously being large enough to make it pass through. So to give you more of a background on the water cooling routing, coolant comes from the front into the CPU block. From the CPU block it goes into the motherboard tray and towards the back. At the back there's a tube that runs all the way to the left. It goes back into the motherboard tray, then goes into the GPU. From the GPU it goes into the motherboard tray and into the pass-through fitting on the rotating disc. Then you can see here there's a 360mm radiator at the bottom and another 360mm radiator at the top. So plenty of cooling. Just want to show you the back as well, without taking the panel off, because it's basically the same on the inside. This is where the reservoirs are, and they're all connected to each other, and the pump is down there. I made it to look like a thruster of a spaceship or something like that. I think it looks really cool. So as for the peripheral cables, that had to be considered as well, obviously. I have another custom fitting for corrugated tubes, as well as a mounting for it on the sides as well. This one is actually open, and when closed it looks like this. I made little covers, and what I can do is just run a corrugated tube that goes from there to there and hide all of the cables, or at least keep them tidy. And I have obviously one for each side for when I have the motherboard tray rotated one side or the other. So here you guys have it. Let me know what you think of this little feature. I think it's pretty unique. Sometimes modding is not only useful stuff but also groundbreaking stuff, things that you don't see every day, and when you actually make them work, it's really satisfying. It just motivates the community to take that extra step into making something new. So I think that's what appealed about A.R.E.S the most. In the future I would also like to bring this rotating concept to other builds, perhaps like a scratch build with a cleaner looking case. This is very full of details and very sci-fi looking, and the rotating motherboard really fits the theme. But I'm really curious to see how it would look in an elegant and minimal case. It would also be a challenge to hide all the stuff I need to hide, because moving mechanisms always have that dark side that you don't want others to see, at least in a showcase scenario. I hope I didn't miss anything about this special feature. Let me know guys if you have any further question. I will be happy to answer them in the comments directly. So if you like this video and don't want to miss the future ones, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, as well as follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, builds.gg, Discord, and also check out our merchandise shop where you can get some swag and support the channel at the same time. All links in the description. Thank you guys for watching, and see you next week.